And with that, we're going to go start out with an interview with Nick Hodges, who's joining us on the line. You still there, Nick?
I am here. Hello.
Hello.
Just for other people, maybe you saw the other day, we wanted to demonstrate some historic things. One of the things I showed was Monday, I think both Monday morning and afternoon, was I showed Delphi 1 running in a Win 3.11 Windows for Workgroups VM on my MacBook Pro, and showed Delphi 1 and mentioned that I think there's a couple different applications that we always build to make sure that a compiler for a new platform works. One is the blank form, just file new whatever form, hit run, put a button down, put an event handler on click event for the button, and change the caption or text to the button. And the third one is edit a list box and a button, and list box items dot add and parenthesis, and then passing edit one dot text to it. And that's always seems to be one of some of the first ones. I think the other thing is then we do is you can do that in FireMonkey as well as VCL. That same coding pattern works. And then when it's working on a new compiler on a new platform, then somebody in one of our R&D offices that led that effort rings a bell, and everybody comes running to find out what the bell ringing was all about. On the sales team side, they also do that when they do some big deals. When a big deal gets closed, sales deal, they'll ring the bell and everybody will come running towards the bell, and you know, it's just sort of built into us now. But I know, Nick, you had mentioned, and Marco Cantu is here this week, and he brought in the original brochure from the Software Development Conference, including his invitation reminder to come to the launch of Delphi 1. And while we're looking forward and what's going on in Delphi today, we're also celebrating the 20 years of continuous innovation. And I think you mentioned, Nick, that you were at the original launch event, right?
I was a student at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey at the time, and we blew off class and went up to SD95 and hung around the Borland booth, which was just packed because everybody wanted to see Zach Erlacher give Delphi demos at 2 and 4 every 2 hours or whatever. And it was usually standing room only in the booth to see a Delphi demo. And then I think it was the second night of the event, you know, Anders got up and gave the big keynote in front of everybody and launched Delphi, and that was quite an exciting event.
I think I remember hearing this story before. The people, when he did the divide by zero exception and the application didn't go down in a ball of flames, people were like falling out of their chairs or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was he did a PCAR set to nil and then tried to access the PCAR, and
okay.
Sure enough, Delphi handled it gracefully and with no problem at all using exception handler. And yes, the Microsoft people in the back were not pleased. It was pretty impressive at the time. That was a very, very impressive demo at the time.
I mean, it's still impressed for me that now with the multi-device stuff in XE7 and recent releases that you have that full, not only visual development and so on, but the runtime library support, the exception handling. I think it was Eli Bowling at Code Rage 9. And Eli has been around for a long time, working deep in the innards of the compilers and the libraries. He did a talk, and if you're interested in exception handling across multiple platforms, he did a talk, I think it was on the third day in the C++ track, at least. He did a talk about all the issues in dealing with exception handling on the different platforms. Win32 exception handling, Win64 is different exception handling than versus OS X, iOS, and Android, and what we have to go through in all the products for Delphi and for C++ language to do the right thing with exceptions. Not only the language-based exceptions, the runtime library, but the platform and hardware exceptions as well.
Yeah, and the cool thing to me is that the same code that worked with Delphi 1 that Anders demoed still works today on all those platforms. Same basic idea.
I also reminded people, even that a lot of the textbook Pascal code that you find in, Charlie Calvert's like Turbo Pascal Programming 101 and some of those other books, go back to the the Jensen and Wirth book, with the original specification for Pascal, I think in our case, a couple of things. We never did the block structured I/O that was in that. Anders and everybody did a different way to do read-ln, write-ln to do the I/O.
Right.
I think the only other thing is back then it was assign, because that's what was in the Jensen Wirth, and close. And we renamed those along the way somewhere to assign file and close file. So if that's all you have to do to change a textbook Pascal console application, that's not too bad. Everything else, if statement, case statement, all that stuff is there.
Yeah, it all works. It's kind of cool.
Then, of course, the objects added, objects in classes added, that came in Pascal 5.5. And then with Delphi, the property method event, sometimes we say the PME model, the property method event model, that's in the product still today. And then enhancements to some of that over time with things like sealed classes and other things that were added along the way. I know, Nick, you cover a bunch of the programming in Delphi in the book you did last year, Coding in Delphi.
Yeah, the book actually covers a lot of the new things like generics and anonymous methods and many of the things that many of the language features that enable a lot of cool libraries like the Spring for D framework, which my book covers quite a bit. And so you can do things like dependency injection, containers, and things like that keep up with and sometimes surpass what's going on in the .NET world and Java and other things.
I love how you have those libraries like Spring 4D and others that really extend what you can do with they extend the way you can program. Really, it changes what you can do and what's possible. It's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, if it weren't for generics and anonymous methods, both, the Spring 4D framework would be nowhere. There'd be nothing that it's practically nothing that it does it could do.
Right. It very fundamentally shifts the way that you develop software.
Yeah, and once you enable those specific types of frameworks, then you can write your software in such a different, more powerful way.
Let's see if I can bring up here the Spring 4D.
I think the other thing you had covered in your book, and we also had you do a webinar. I think it was February of last year. People should check that out. It was one of the Rad in Action webinars that was related to coding in Delphi. I think that was the title, in fact, Coding in Delphi. I think it was the same as the book. And in the book there, you also talk about things that you should not use in the language. I think that was one part of it. Or maybe it was some of the runtime library stuff. But why don't you tell everybody some of the guidance that you give in your book about what things that you shouldn't do or use in Delphi?
Well, I think you're crossing something up somewhere because I don't have a chapter on that, but I definitely have written a number of blog posts on things not to do. The latest one I've written is don't use nil anywhere, and that's always exciting.
I know we got in a big debate on Twitter over that one.
What about process? Was it process messages? Was that one of them?
Application process messages, you should probably never call that either.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's blog posts. I'm not sure. You write so much good stuff and guidance, to help people avoid doing stupid stuff.
So, Jim, you'll notice that if you go to that link on Delphi on LeanPub, is that a LeanPub link?
Yeah, that's LeanPub.
Add on the end of it /C/Delphi week.
C Delphi week?
/C/Delphi week. And that should take you to...
Oh,
look at that.
$10 off.
$10 off.
Cool.
Running a special. You can get the electronic version of my book for $20. That's $10 off. Just for folks listening and just for folks on the Delphi week hashtag.
I need to track you down and get you to sign my print copy I got.
No problem. I'd be happy to do that. I'd be happy to sign any book, and you want to send it to me, I'll be happy to sign it. Anybody. It'd be my pleasure. But yeah, it was a lot of fun writing that book. It took me about 2 years to do, 1 year of sort of putzing around and 1 year of being serious about it. And then it was actually the deal that you guys struck with me to include the book as part of
it was probably XE6.
Upsell.
Yeah, maybe it was XE6.
XE6, yeah. That really pushed me over the hump. I had Michael Swindell gave me a deadline, and so I had to get it done. So that was what really pushed me over to get the work done and get it put out the door. It's not an easy task writing a book, as I think I don't know, David, you've written a few books over the years.
No, I've written a lot of stuff and things that looked like books, like a whole training course for people getting started in programming. That was like 500 pages, 600. It's a lot of work.
I've written contributed chapters to books before, and it's a lot of work. Yeah, especially we had an editor that's like, okay, gotta have this deliverable by this date, got this many chapters, and it was just a constant. And then it's like, oh, you gotta fix this, and I would just carry my laptop with me everywhere I went and had to hop online and work on stuff just every second I had.
Yeah, I did chapters for the Teixeira Pacheco books, and I remember that process. It's nothing like self-publishing, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I think another area which has been great, and you've provided some insights that you've learned, is that you've gone into companies where you, what's not the term, inherited, or you were dumped into a whole bunch of existing code that was built by all sorts of people. I don't want to say bad things about maybe those people, but because that's not fair, I suppose. We learn new tricks and things over time. I'm sure I wrote really bad programs many years ago.
I look at code I wrote yesterday and say, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
My goodness.
But I know you've had to come in there and clean up a whole bunch of stuff, right, as well.
That's one of the things. That's my main task right now. I took about 2 years ago, I took over a very old code base that had been written over probably about 12 years, and I've been slowly but surely wrapping it in interfaces and pulling it apart and decoupling it. Some of it will never get decoupled just because it's some of that code you don't even want to touch. You have that code like, don't touch that. It works, and we just want to leave it. But yeah, that has been one of the things I've done a couple times now, is taken older code bases and tried to modernize them. And that's kind of what my book is about, was trying to write clean code in Delphi, the right way to do it. And hopefully that's encouraged people to start writing new code in that way, and maybe clean up a little bit of their old code to use better techniques.
Yeah, Dustin is saying, he said, Nick, a year ago or so, you gave a Code Rage session on unit testing. Just wanted to say thanks. It set off a whole new era on our project. Well,
that's great news. That makes me happy. Unit testing is critical to the success of good code. Matter of fact, I would argue you can't write good, clean code without unit testing. So that's great.
I think, as you put it, you don't know if you've written good, clean code or not until you have a unit test on it.
Yeah, you don't. There's no way to know. You can't tell.
Yeah, I don't know
exactly right.
I don't know if you saw, Jim. There was that Google Plus posting by Stefan. I always pronounce his name wrong. Glenke. No.
Glenke, yeah.
About Test
Insight.
Test Insight. Yeah, he's got a plugin for the IDE that he's been working on to make unit testing even.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I don't know if you've looked at it yet. We're trying to get him on to talk about it sometime.
Yeah, he did a beautiful job with that, and the cool thing I like about it is it works with DUnit, DUnit 2, and DUnit X.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. That's the cool thing, is because there's
libraries.
There's a kind of different libraries there, and he covered them all.
Lets you run your unit test right in the IDE, and we'll run them automatically for you every time you make a change, or I don't know what else it does. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so Dustin, check out, maybe you can paste that link in to Dustin's comment about unit testing. If you haven't seen that, Dustin and others, it's on. He talks about it on his Delphi Sorcery blogspot site. So there's the link. Yeah.
And the cool thing about this is the big thing with DUnit X that people were frustrated with is there was not a GUI for it yet. and it looks like, here it is, test insight. Hey, this test failed. And it works with DUnitX. There we go. We've got a GUI for DUnitX.
Yeah, there you go.
And if you scroll up just a moment, go back up a little bit, there's, there you go, Spring tests. Yeah, he's got Spring Base, Spring Core, because he's involved there, right, Nick?
Yeah, he's the lead developer for the Spring 3D project now. He took over from Paul, what's Paul's last name? Bao. And he's the guy, and he's been doing some great work there, expanding it. He's working on some interception stuff, which enables powerful and easy-to-do aspect-oriented programming. And I know they've got a ORM, an object relational model, in work as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the Delphi Spring for D framework. And I know there's another ORM, a couple other ORMs have sprung up recently. Mormot, is that one?
Yeah, Marmot. And then there's Aurelius from TMS, which we had on Code Rage 6, I think, 6 or 7.
Right, yeah. Yep. So, again, modern coding techniques enabled by the new language features is really keeping Delphi, you really got to work hard to keep up with what's going on in Delphi.
Oh, yeah. So now in your Coding in Delphi book, you talked about Spring 4D and XUnit, or DUnitX as well. Was there other libraries you talked about too, weren't there?
I talked about Delphi. I had a chapter on Delphi mocks. There's a chapter on Delphi mocks in there that shows proper mocking technique. You're not writing unit tests. You're not really writing unit tests if you're not writing if you're not testing your code in isolation.
Exactly.
And Delphi mocks helps you to isolate your code. I think that's all the libraries I talked about in there. Certainly, I did some sections on the collections part of Spring Framework where they have interface-based collections, lists and stacks and queues and dictionaries and all that fun stuff. There's a lot of power there, and that builds on top of the generics.collections unit in Delphi itself. And so, yeah, I think I'm coming close to saturating the market with coding in Delphi. The sales have slowed down, but if you haven't gotten it, I obviously recommend that you do.
And on sale this week for Delphi Week.
On sale this week for Delphi developers, for anybody on LeanPub. Use the code word Delphi Week, and you can get $10 off the book.
So now what do you have coming in more coding in Delphi?
Well, I've been working on a new book. I was very humbled by the success of the first one. And so I wanted to kind of continue the tradition with focusing on code and coding techniques. And so I'm working on a new book called More Coding in Delphi, where I cover things like aspect-oriented programming and MVVM and what else? Let me look it up. I'll have to look it up.
Solid
principles, duck typing, some patterns. I'm going to cover 5 patterns, some 5 development patterns in Delphi as well. Operator overloading, that's kind of cool. That's, I think, an underappreciated feature in Delphi. So look for that hopefully by the end of the year. As I said, it's really hard and takes a lot of work, but I really enjoy it, and I've appreciated the support and kind words that I've gotten from people. So I decided to write another one. So now I'm on the hook to do it, I guess. I have to produce something now that I've said it publicly. I've said it on my blog, but...
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to it.
Well, yeah, I totally recommend self-publishing. If you're interested in writing a book, I recommend self-publishing it. Couldn't be easier. The hardest part is writing the book. The easy part was publishing it. And I thought it was going to be the other way around when I started. Yeah. The hardest part is actually writing the book. Once you get the book written, using Leanpub platform and CreateSpace made it unbelievably easy to publish the book itself.
And especially how where you're building a community as you write by sharing what you're working on and getting feedback as you go. That kind of helps you get your customers before you even got the book finished.
Yeah, I built up a group of over 700 people, and I'm asking them to read the chapters in my upcoming book, and that's in process. So if you want to help write the book, proofread the book, get an advanced look at it, I guess, you can do that in the Google Plus group, Coding in Delphi. It's a private group. You have to ask to join, and I approve you to come in.
You let me in, so I think it's pretty low standards.
That's a good point, yeah. I don't know if that's good or bad. But there is a Google group for that, and I've got there's over 700 folks.
718 members. Yep, look at that. And look, here's the chapter on Solid right there. We could go read it right now and learn all about Solid principles.
There you go.
Single responsibility, open closed, Liskov's substitution
principle, interface segregation principle, and dependency inversion principle. I can remember them.
Good. Very good. All right, great.
So come join the group and help out. I'm very grateful to the many people who proofread my first book and made it better. It wouldn't be what it is without the folks on the Google groups, so I'm very grateful.
And if we follow you on Twitter, we can hear about your escapades at Burger King on the weekend.
Yeah. Saturday and mornings, I usually get up and go to Burger King real early and work, and there's always the same group of older folks come in and sit down, and they have their cup of coffee and maybe eat a little breakfast, and I'm sitting there pounding away on my book, and they're over there. It's the same group every week. It's kind of funny. They must think of the same about me. So, there's that guy again. But
playing on his computer.
It's been I get a lot of work done there. I can't work at home. I have too many pets and kids.
Yeah, I found that having a little interruption like that, being someplace else, really helps getting the work done.
Yeah, I get a lot of work done there, and so it's kind of become a tradition to do it on Saturday morning. So sometimes Sundays too. So
I just wait till it gets quiet at home. Everyone's asleep.
Yeah, see, I can get a ton of work done at night, but sometimes I like to go to bed.
No. What is it? Sleep's not an efficient use of time. Just kidding. But I get up really early and it's quiet and can do stuff. Plus, then the time offset for our teams and customers that are in Europe or elsewhere, and then late at night gets me to Malcolm in Australia and people in APAC. So, but I'm older, so maybe I don't need. I usually joke saying, I slept when I was a baby and a teenager, so now's the time to do more cool stuff.
There you go.
But I know, Nick, I think I first met you at the Naval Postgraduate School.
You did.
I think when I was Borland, I forget how many years ago, but it was a long time ago, probably in Turbo Pascal, maybe 5.5 or Turbo Pascal for Windows, I'm not sure, or Mac.
It was in 93, 94, and I think you came and demoed Borland Pascal 3.1.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But I remember going down there, and I think you had
Borland C++. It was definitely a C++.
Oh, okay. You had a computer club. I think there was like a computer club at the Naval Postgraduate School.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah, that was a really exciting time because the internet was just coming into the fore. And so we all had web pages, and we were putting flashing GIFs and all kinds of things on.
Of course.
On our web pages.
Everybody had to have those flashing construction signs. This website's under construction.
Signs and the long, thin rainbow GIF that you'd use to separate sections of your homepage.
Yes.
That was back when Yahoo was two college kids manually updating their HTML pages as you sent them emails. If you wanted to get on Yahoo, you sent an email to those Jerry Yang and who are those two guys? And they updated the HTML on their webpage, the Yahoo webpage.
Yeah, the other thing I remember, it was easier back then to get into the Naval Postgraduate School. Of course, in the post 9/11, it's much harder to to get into those places.
Probably can't get on campus anymore.
Yeah.
I see you have a useful link here. I should point my people to this one. The isdelphidead.com.
Yeah.
We can go out and check.
All of those sites. There you go.
Not dead. That's good. Good to know.
I think another area, I wanted to go back for a moment to TSmiley. Because I remember when we were first showing and talking about Delphi in pre-release beta modes and visiting with different developers, and then we launched the product, there was always that discussion about look at all these useful components, right? There was, they can do amazing things. You had the database access, you had the user interface components, and everything. You could build your own components and property editors, component editors, you can still do all of that today. But the fog of war, maybe, is that the right thing? The fog of programming? I'm still vague on when the notion of what we need are useless components.
Well, that was yeah, I'll never live that down, will I? I wrote that during the beta. I was lucky enough to get on the beta. I went to a Team B picnic. I don't know if you remember those.
Oh, yeah, the CompuServe and Team B picnics, yeah.
Team B, and I went there and I met Zach while I was at the Navy Postgraduate School again, and he got me on the beta. And I remember that, I was a Turbo Pascal for Windows programmer, and I remember being very frustrated that if you wanted to write some kind of component, you had to do it in C++ and then turn it into a VBX component, or I forget how it worked. Was that the coolest thing about Delphi, as I remember, was that you could write components in Delphi. You didn't have to write your OCX or VBX or DLLs or whatever in another language. You could write components in Delphi. And I remember the Minesweeper app had a little smiley on it, and I thought, I want to build something simple, something easy, but I want to build that, and I built it. And somehow you guys got a hold of it and demoed it all over the world, and now I never live it down.
Yeah, no, Charlie Calvert, myself, I remember I created multi-smiley because you could, a form has a component array, right? And so you could just create a whole bunch of smileys and add them to the component array, and they pop up on the form. And then you could have a timer that would search through all the components of the component array and ask if it's a T-smiley, then set its mood to some other random value. And then you had all these flashing, sticking tongue out, smiling, frowning, smileys all bouncing up and down, so we could show T-timer, that component, and the form's component array at the same time.
I remember that demo well.
Yeah.
I remember that.
That was multi-smiley. It wasn't a multi-component. It was just, a simple, stupid app. But it drove home the point back then, long before enhanced RTTI and other things, that you could still get at all the components. Oh, yeah. You could see what they were. The other way was to use the tag property and put values in there and use the tag property to tell you which ones that you might want to do something with.
Oh, don't do that, David.
Just way back when. Way back when. But no, the component array, and then you could just ask it what it was. And then once you knew what it was, you could take the component array dot whatever property you wanted, dot text, dot, tag, dot whatever, and do things.
Yep.
So
I remember that well.
There's a question here about the Spring 4D framework. It says, why have the same name as the Java Spring for Java framework? Is that just a joke, or is there a reason that they're similar?
No, I think originally it was designed after, feature-wise, it was designed after the Java Spring framework. It's got a lot of the same functionality, the collections, and the. I know that Spring, one of Spring's main functions is as a dependency injection container. So it wasn't a joke. I just think it originally was kind of modeled after the Java Spring framework, and the name just stuck.
Well, it's like JUnit was the Java version. It was DUnit. Was similar.
Everybody has XUnit, NUnit, CUnit, DUnit, JUnit, FUnit.
Yeah, it's a nice shorthand form, Spring 4D, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to spell this whole thing out.
So Thomas said he had the pleasure of meeting you in a Philly event in August 2013.
That's Entirely possible.
He says it's great to meet Nick and a couple other people I've read and heard over the years. I live in a consulting cocoon far too much of the time.
I can sympathize with that, yeah. But yeah, you've had a couple of events here. I think Al Manarino's came and talked a couple of times, and had a pretty good crowd of folks come. And I think I went up to an event in New York City too that Al did, and had some fun. Yeah.
I remember the time you drove down. I think you drove 3 hours or so. I was in D.C. and you drove. Drove down.
It's not a bad drive. It's a pleasant drive.
Yeah. But, it's fun when we get to go all over the place and meet people, like Thomas is mentioning. Sometimes I'm here. It's a luxury being here in Scotts Valley, and you were here, Nick, as well. And you got R&D guys. You can walk over and talk to Alan Bauer, grab the compiler guys. And there's people elsewhere as well, which is a little harder, but with Skype and all these other things. And then in my travels where I get to stop in on offices and visit with people, it's nice to see real humans face-to-face instead of this online stuff.
Oh yeah. I traveled quite a bit when I was at Borland /Code Gear / Embarcadero.
Yeah.
And I always enjoyed that. I always had a good time.
So if you had to pick one Delphi language feature as your most favorite, because in your book and your writings, you talk about all sorts of things that you can leverage in the language and the runtime library and so on. I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you for your 3 favorite things. So we'll start with favorite language feature. 1.
Generics.
Okay. And why?
Because they just enable so many powerful techniques like dependency injection and collections.
Yeah, collections would be my favorite, real containers with generics. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, in runtime library, favorite runtime library unit?
Date utils.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good one.
I wrote all the unit tests that you guys hopefully are still running for that, so...
Okay. I know there was somewhere along the way in some of the units, and it was one of the conversion utilities, Eddie Churchill, who was working for Delphi and then moved up to that place way up north in the frozen wasteland of Washington. He was doing some conversion units, and he did some crazy conversions.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, he has in the conversion utils unit, you can convert seconds to fortnights and things like that. Like how many seconds in a fortnight?
Yeah, I think there were some other conversion utility units that are functions that didn't make any sense, like converting two things that really aren't convertible directly. Like maybe feet to foot. No, that doesn't make sense. Foot pounds. Maybe it was that. I'm not sure. And then, what's your favorite component besides TSmiley?
My favorite component,
or a component group, maybe.
My favorite component is got to be T-Edit.
Okay.
T-Edit?
And why?
Because it's just simple and it gets the job done. How about that?
Okay. And now on the multi-device, what we're doing, and we started with iOS, we're actually connecting for T-Edit the native edit on iOS. So under the covers, we're implementing all the right stuff for iOS, and Darren Kaczynski did a talk about that at Code Rage 9 in the in both tracks, in C++ and Delphi track, about how you can take control and underneath the covers. And of course, TMS has their ICL component set, which are a direct connection from to the native UI controls under the covers in iOS. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. That's good.
And so
it continues to grow and expand and increase in capabilities. That's great.
So in all the work you do, so I'll put this question in all the work you do, there's all this Delphi code. You must use some third-party components, maybe open source components, other components. Can you say some of the packages or components or vendors that you might use as well in or that are used in the projects that you're working on?
In the project, the only third-party components we use MatAccept, which is a really cool exception handling tool. and we use Spring for D. I started plugging in some Spring for D collections, and actually was using them today to build a rules engine. And but we don't. But the application itself, one of the interesting things about it was clearly written by a C programmer, not a C++ programmer, a C programmer. So there's a lot of raw sockets instead of INDI, and
doing things the hard way.
Yeah, things like that. So we don't use any commercial third-party software much at all, which I thought was very interesting. But you know, I hate to have that as the answer for the question, but I'd much prefer a solution that's using more powerful grids and things. But it was very much a roll your own solution.
Okay. Or maybe in a previous time before, you know, not when you were here.
Yeah, my previous job we used TMS, the entire, you know, the TMS suite, and that made for a very nice, beautiful interface to the application. And so, you know, it took a while to convert over to use it for the thousands of forms the application had at Gateway, but Gateway ticketing. But you know, we slowly but surely migrated over to use all the new and better looking components and controls that TMS comes up with.
Yep. Yeah, we had Bruno Ferenz last Friday and the Technology Partner Spotlight giving an overview of the TMS components. Great. And some stuff he's working on. He's got a rich edit component, cross-platform, and a spell checker,
Wow.
Cross-platform. So he was demoing some sort of test versions of those, which was really cool because we've had several people who've said, "Hey, we need a cross-platform rich edit component."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was one guy that does educational software, and he needs a spell checker that's cross-platform as well. So,
hey, there you go.
Yeah. Karam's. Go ahead.
Great to see. I was going to say it's just great to see people doing cross-platform components and code for Delphi.
Yeah.
And FireMonkey code component sets. That's great.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll ask this in a different way. Karam was putting in there. I'll say it this way: is there a feature of Delphi that you really want us to spend a lot of time, more time on? He says, "What's the worst feature for you in Delphi?" But maybe some. I was trying to ask it in a different way, but maybe I'll just say, and please, what's the worst feature for you in Delphi?
Well, actually, the thing that a month ago, I would have said that, you know, the code editor and you know, refactorings and things like that. But now that Castalia is sort of part of the deal, it seems like that you guys are taking care of that. So I'll have to come up with another thing to complain about, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, Castalia is part of the promo pack right now, but we've acquired the technology for Castalia and also user-utility from 2Desk Software. And Castalia is being integrated into the IDE, and Jacob's doing work on C++ as well for the future. But, yeah, we've got the Castalia. I think most recent, somebody was saying there's a 2014.12 release. We have, I think, in the register user download the 2014.11. Maybe Code Central's been updated. I'll have to double check. But, yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed using that, and it's been a great upgrade. So, well done. So, now that, you know, the older I get, or the longer I've been coding, the more I'm into just code itself and not so much components and the visual side of it, but the code side of it. And so any improvement to the code editor makes me happy.
Yeah. And well, you know, and I know because we've been around a little bit, the refactoring engine that we put in a long time ago in the IDE definitely needs modernizing, so it'll be great to have all of that and to have that now with Castalia.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it for sure.
I still want those VCL controls when you drop them down to be empty, like the edit and memo. I think I bugged you about that multiple times when you were here. That it made sense in Delphi 1 because it was all new to people and they were dropping stuff around and like, which is that one? And we didn't have the structure window.
Yeah.
Right. We didn't have the structure window. So in the early days, where's that edit one? Okay. So we put edit one in the text property, and you always have to clear it out. Right.
I think Alan was the one who didn't like, somebody didn't like that, because I totally agree with you.
Well,
somebody didn't want to take that out.
Yeah. I mean, with the structure window, you can kind of see and you can select them and then they get highlighted and so on. But again, Delphi 1 didn't have a structure window. So you had to figure out where all these things were without having click on each one, go look at the object inspector. So that was part of that answer. And then you could create your own, right? Your T-empty edit. So you just override the constructor, have it clear out the text property, and you drop a T-empty edit or clean edit or whatever we wanted to call it.
I've worked on a lot of big
memo and this panel also.
Yeah, panel. Because sometimes panel you want to put some caption on it, I suppose, but most of the time it's a container, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I've worked on some big projects, and a few times we've had rules where we didn't use anything straight off the component palette. We had to wrap everything, and that way it gave us the ability that later on we could augment all of them at once as a way of because we had that extra layer of indirection in there. And so that was one of the things we fixed whenever we always, all of them would have removed that text out, default text.
Yeah.
And again, that's the beauty of components. Again, in that case, you just override the constructor. You could add properties and fields to them. I mean, it's just, that was that whole beauty as it came along, right from the beginning. And that developers had the total control. Of course, what is it? With great power comes great responsibility.
Indeed, yeah.
From Spider-Man, because if you create a property editor or a component editor, you have full access to the inside of the IDE.
Oh yeah,
there's no sandbox.
No, I've done some really interesting stuff with that. It's kind of a lot of that's the idea of having all of our components wrapped. Started with where we have this huge project, and we'd we need to make all the drop boxes behave slightly differently. And so we started, we'll make our own Dropbox. And then I wrote a component. I think that's what I did, because I didn't quite understand property editor. So I wrote a component, because a component actually, it has access, when you drop the component on, can do stuff to other components. So I wrote a component that you drop on the form, and it would go through and find all of the other combo boxes on the page and change them into make the changes to them, make them into new type of combo box, and then remove itself from the form. And then we actually were migrating from one data access component to another set of data access components. So I did the same trick again. You just drop this component on the form, and it goes through and interrogate all the data access components, create new ones, copy all the properties over, and then delete the old one and give the new one the new name, and then remove itself from the form. Of course,
it's fantastic.
Now there's other easier ways I know how to do that, but at the time I was pretty proud of myself for that one.
No, I know. Yesterday we had Marco Cantu. I think it was yesterday morning, Tuesday. He did. He reprised some of the things he's done in the past with the fun side of Delphi, yes, which was his answer to Mark Miller's The Dark Side of Delphi.
Right.
Where Mark would do
classics.
Yeah, we used to do these evening sessions at the conferences, which were the lighter side or sort of stranger thing, because people were in sessions all day long doing serious learning, serious understanding of architecture and development.
Monday nights. It was always Monday nights.
Yeah. So we do the lighter side talks in the evening after dinner, meet the teams and other things as well. And Mark did the dark side, so he would have components and other things that you would put in, because he would just go spelunking through the lower innards of the IDE, even stuff that wasn't documented, to make the menus upside down, all sorts of cool things. Not that they were useful.
Dragging things all over the place and reconstituting the IDE and pulling windows off, and he was doing some crazy stuff.
Years ago in Turbo Pascal days, I figured out how to read the font and that was stored in memory, because on DOS, each font got stored in the memory, and go through and flip all the font bitmaps upside down. Yeah. And I wrote a program called FlipFont. It was written in Turbo Pascal. And I put it up on my BBS I had at the time, and I ran into somebody much later, and I'd forgotten about it altogether. And I was chatting with him, and he's like, "Your name's..." He was like, wait, you wrote FlipFont. And I'm like, "That's right, I did." He goes, "Yeah, the bank I was working at, I noticed it was in the sysadmin area, this program called SysOp FlipFont that I had installed, and had your name on it." So apparently it had quite a big life of its own after I published that one online, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I always like digging in and find those crazy things, like the Fire UI, the drop downs, because we have right now, you have drop down where you can put tablet or right where you specify the views. You have tablet views and phone views and desktop views, but then I define my own for the watches. But in doing so, I found out that there's other character classes, other device classes in there besides tablet and watch. There's car, I think it's automotive, and there's another one for wearable, and then there's one for wizard, and there's one for dwarf, and I think there's one other one in there that was like, oh, those are some interesting classes. I don't know if they're still there. That was in the XE7 when it was first released, so it may have gotten removed in 7.1 or 7 update 1. But
my favorite editor thing is to play with the colors. So if you want to have good developer cred, just set all the comments to be like white on white or background color on foreground color. That way, when you show people code, you just say, yeah, my code's so good, I don't need to comment it. Or change all the keywords to color to be, background color on foreground color so that all the keywords disappear. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say, listen, guys, I need to get going.
No, it's great. Thanks, Nick.
Oh, yeah, it is.
You're
wow.
very welcome.
That went quickly.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the
I have
theme
an
editor.
hour-long commute, and I got to take my kids somewhere sometime.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, Nick, it was great talking with you. And again, thank you for everything you're doing for Delphi, the books, the talks, the blogs, and can't wait for the next book.
Well, I'll keep working on it at Burger King, so and keep you updated on what's going on there.
Excellent.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
Okay. Bye, Nick.
See you.
Yep.
Bye-bye.